vehicle codes because they have the authority to do that. If we can entrust them with that level of responsibility, we can certainly entrust them with a key that's going to enhance response time.
And pay for it. Perfect. What about gift of public funds? Are we allowed to give big agencies money, like $5,000? I mean, we went through this whole special events thing that we'll get to, and we had to make cuts, but yet.
No, it would be illegal to give a gift of public funds. However, there's a relatively low standard for what is a gift of public funds, as long as the city council determines that there's a public purpose or a public benefit behind the expenditure. So in this case, if the city council were to determine that there's a public safety benefit in providing this system to AMR, it wouldn't be a gift of public funds.
So if AMR is liable for the calls that they go on, why wouldn't they be getting their keys and their boxes if they wanted them?
I guess you bring up a good point.
It's simply a budget allocation. Their budget year is on a different cycle than ours, so there's no funding available. They have every dollar earmarked as we do in terms of their budget. And in this particular case, I felt my due diligence was again to ensure that we addressed a problem that's a very real problem, very real issue, and not to wait. And I might add, this is not general fund money. This is not city money. This is not Measure U money. And I want to make sure that that's clear. This is I don't even want to use the term benefit, but this is part of our contractual situation that we have set with the county. The county establishes the contracts, is responsible for the ambulance contracts, and the provision in our contract as a provider of paramedic service is that we have access to this fund specifically for the city of Hemet, and it can only be used for the item just like we have before you today. So it's completely in alignment, and again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's for the patients.
I have one more question for you.
Yes.
Palm Springs Fire Department, did they get reimbursed by AMR for those boxes?
I don't know the business arrangement they had with them. We looked at Palm Springs for the technical. We looked around. There's a wide variety of different types of security devices. This Model 5 that we're purchasing has what I was impressed with was the electronic accountability piece. So I know on any given day how those keys are being used.
I think it's great for our fire department.
Yeah.
But we can't buy everybody Knox boxes that comes to the city.
Well, I think we're limiting that scope, and so not to. I'll just close with this. AMR is an important partner in our system, and they are part of our pre-hospital care system. We have transport, we have response, and those two are integral. They're not separated. We wear different patches, but we're one. And that one responsibility is to ensure when Mrs. Smith calls 911 that we get there in a timely fashion and we can address the emergency, fire, medical, or otherwise. That is key. So that's why I'm before you today with this recommendation. I believe it's in the best interest of the citizens and our system, bottom line. Thank you.
I can certainly appreciate Councilmember Meyer's concerns, legitimate concerns. I also very much support what Mayor Pro Tem Brown has provided as well. So and if it's an enhancement for our public safety, and certainly the safety of our residents, which is #1 priority, I think that's the utmost important part of this. Oh God, I just lost my train of thought. Oh gosh, that's a good point. Oh gosh. So these units, how many units were there? I've forgotten.
17.
And they're dispersed. How many are dispersed to AMR?
AMR is going to be receiving a total of five only, and those 5 are for the units that are out-based and respond typically a majority of the time with Hemet Fire Department, and they're based out of the Hemet AMR facility here. And the balance of those other key locking systems will go and be placed on each one of our frontline engines, our 5 engines, and our 2 medic squads. And again, the key here is to provide that access as well. And for the fire side, there's currently no security for those keys. So we're fixing that. But we're fixing this collectively as the system. Make sure we respond timely, there's no delay, we secure them, and we account for them. Straightforward.
So, and I do agree on the soft costs, that a breakdown should be provided, because arbitrarily you just have a number and really don't know what it all consists of. It's important to know that. So, hopefully we can keep that in mind, and it would be appreciative if we can know that as well, if it helps Councilmember Meyer.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not about helping me. It's about following procedure and being accountable to the citizens. $33,000, whatever you want, soft costs, miscellaneous, whatever you want to call it. What are we buying, a bunch of teddy bears? Are we going to approve it right now so that he can keep saying, since I've been here, you guys have been approving this? Are we going to do that? Because if we can approve it tonight, he can keep saying that.
I think we've given some direction from the standpoint of what we expect in the future.
We've been saying that for years. Everybody else got held accountable. Chris got held accountable for her expenses in Public Works. And how fair is it that not everybody is?
So you're asking about, you have a point about, we brought up the point about the breakdown, because that's important. And arbitrarily just throwing a number out isn't the best practice to do this. But the bottom line is, what we're approving tonight, or not, is the ability to provide an additional safety guard for our residents in case they're in need.
We are subsidizing a $2.4 billion company tonight, is what we're doing. If they want it, they can get it. If it has been a problem for their calls, then they would be sued. As far as the money, we asked for accountability from our staff, and he doesn't have to show it.
So what we can do, if the council would like, is we can take it as 2 items, one on the Knox box, and then we can bring back the $33,000 purchased itemized. If the council would like that, we'd be more than happy to do that if the council desires that.
Which is how this is how that sequences normally. So, again, the $33,000 request is an aggregate number. We're still in the process of assessing what our needs are going to be, and when we go through that purchase, we come back to the council. We request the recommendation to authorize to purchase X, Y, Z. And for the record, no teddy bears. None. And that's important. But the bottom line is that, yeah, that is part of how this works. We're just front loading this as and if I in any way offended you with minimizing the importance of the protocol and policy, that is not my intent. I'm trying to share a very important part of our commitment to make sure that we're following process. And that's what we've been doing from the beginning.
Here's the question. Would REMSA okay $33,000? You said they already okay this? So you can tell them that $33,000 of soft cost is okay, and they said yes?
The soft cost I have to account for. So every piece of equipment, as I shared with you earlier, the $260,000 of appropriations that we've spent since 2017 utilizing this fund. I just gave you the line item. That's part of our annual accounting that we go through, and you will get a copy of that, of everything that we have purchased and what it's tied to to ensure that that's part of my requirement, our city's requirement to the county, as part of their yearly annual audit that goes
So
forward.
Chief, you would have to bring back whatever those $33,000 purchases are to the council for them to
Yes.
approve, correct?
Yes. That hasn't changed.
That's not what it says in the motion, if we make a motion about this.
So I think the
Then
right,
let's put it in the motion.
Okay, let me try to float a motion here and see what happens. I move to approve recommended action, first bullet, for the utilization of the AMR penalty fees in the amount of $50,000. Bullet 2, to approve the purchase of 17 new Key Secure 5 locking systems with the appropriate hardware and software. And bullet 3, authorize city manager to approve purchase orders in support of this purchase. And that bullet 4 be brought back to us with some itemization of proposed expenditures. I know it's a lengthy motion.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Please vote.
I have some more discussion on this. City Attorney, is there going to be a contract involved with giving these or installing them inside of the vehicles and that type of stuff? I mean, are we going to try to do anything legal or correct?
I can't tell you. I haven't
All
been
right.
involved in this process. I'm sorry.
All right. I thought you'd like that.
So, and 5, go ahead.
yeah, we can look into an agreement, whatever we need to do to make sure that there's the protections in place, yeah.
And maybe,
The MOA we talked about, letter of intent.
and maybe, Russ, you want to add to your motion so that you're clear that we're buying 5 of these for another company that makes $2.44 billion a year.
City of Hemet maintains ownership of those 5 units, so it's a long-term loan, and that's how we've approached it, similar to what we've done with the radio. So we maintain the ownership in totality.
It's important to know.
Yeah.
So I have a first and a second. Please vote. And that passes 3-1.
And now our staff knows the council majority is okay with blank checks and buying other items for other companies.
Well, actually not, because we asked for an itemized statement.
You're buying boxes for a for-profit company, and that is a fact.
We're also protecting our citizens. So we go on now to item number 7E, and I just want some clarification on the, obviously this is about the amending the employment agreement that we initially had with the interim city manager for his position. And so my question is the 6-month additional extension. I would hope to heck that we would know what we're doing before that 6 months is up. I mean, if in fact, regardless of what direction we decide to go, whether or not he applies for the position or whatever the case may be, I would like to know sooner than 60 days or 6 months from now that before 6 months from now that we have a direction that we're going to go in, so that we don't prolong a decision that needs to be made sooner rather than later.
Mayor, I know your colleagues would certainly agree. I think that the interim city manager and I discussed that. We put in a 6-month term as a placeholder. I believe it's our intent to get direction from you, and has been our intent to get direction for the last 2 council meetings with regard to that process.
Yeah.
So, yes, the reason for 6 months, I think that was our best estimate, that if you gave us direction to start a recruitment process today for a city manager, it could very well take 6 months, and we would need his contract to cover that length of period of time. So that's the thinking behind the 6 months.
So I might hope that in the very near future, hopefully our next council meeting, we won't have so many closed session items that we can't get to this, as has happened for the last two meetings. So, and actually, we would have gone ahead and done it tonight had we had a full five member council. So, with that said, not too many.
I'm the same.
I'm not going to stay at 11 o'clock again and still not be able to finish. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve 7E.
Second.
Please vote. Oh, I didn't ask if anybody else had anything to say. Does anybody else have any other comments? No? Okay. And that passes 4-0. Next, item 8, discussion action items. Approve the Fourth Amendment to the exclusive franchise agreement, comprehensive refuse services by and between the City of Hemet and CR&R Incorporated. Recommendation is to approve the Fourth Amendment to exclusive franchise agreement with CR&R.
Yeah, so we have Chris and Alex from CR&R who will be here to provide information on this item. And Chris is just getting it all prepared and ready to go. So as soon as it's ready, we'll be ready to go.
Was Mr. Underwood? I'm totally thrown off with doing this letter PDF instead of a PowerPoint. I'm sorry. That's the super top secret key. Okay. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. The item before you tonight, item 8A, is addressing a request that we received from CR&R. We have a franchise agreement with CR&R, as you know, for our refuse and recycling services. And what we have found is over the last many months, and you probably read and heard about many things that have impacted this, is we've seen a huge change in the recycling market. With China closing its doors to accepting recyclable materials internationally, it has really impacted the entire industry. And as we will hear from Mr. Alex Brekovich, who is here from CR&R tonight, he's going to kind of take us through that China sword situation that's going on. So what we're looking for in terms of the Fourth Amendment is an extraordinary fee that is potentially resulting from this. And then we also, because we were looking at making some changes, possibly letting you consider some changes to the agreement, we also had some items related to insurances and the insurance levels and some things that have changed in the industry. So I am going to ask that Mr. Brekovich join me, and he can take us through the information regarding the recycling markets. And then if we have questions about the insurance, I'm sure that the city attorney would be able to help us walk through that. So here we go. Sir.
How do I go from slide to slide?
Up and down? Okay.
Yep.
You're on the other way?
It's up to you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. My name is Alex Brekovich. I'm the Senior Regional Vice President with CR&R. I thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to explain this issue. This is a presentation I've given many times this year to all of our jurisdictions throughout our service area. Our industry is changing dramatically. There are things going on in our industry that we have never, ever experienced before. Just to give you a brief review, this year the state of California took up 80 different bills associated to our industry. Those bills, unfortunately, most of them impact our jurisdictions directly. It's a very, very
interesting time that we live in with regards to our industry. One particular issue that is dramatically impacting everybody is something called China's national sword. This started back in late 2017, and it initiated in January of 2018. And what I'd like to do is walk you through a little bit about what that's all about. So a little bit of a background. In 2016, China was importing about 45 million tons of recycled materials from across the world. That's about half of the global recyclable exports. Those materials are worth about $18 billion. From the U.S. exports alone, that accounted for 16 million tons of material, almost $6 billion worth of recycled materials. And that's about 1/3 of China's waste imports. Believe it or not, the number one export out of the LA, Long Beach ports was recyclable materials. Approximately 60% of the recycled materials coming from the West Coast, meaning Washington, Oregon, California, were exported to China. In 2017, China filed with the World Trade Organization some changes to the type of materials they're going to be accepting. They were announcing a 0.3% contamination limit on all imported materials. And basically what that means is you couldn't bring anything into China that had more than 0.3% contamination in the recycled materials. In 2017, November 2017, they relaxed those limits to a whole 0.5%, which is absolutely no change. Those filings affected 24 different types of materials. Notably, China will effectively no longer accept mixed plastics, mixed papers. And that sent a dramatic shockwave through the global recycling markets. And not only did it affect plastic and paper, but it affected everything else as well, cardboard and so on. So global impacts. There's now a global glut of recycled materials, which have depressed the commodities prices, supply and demand. Alternative processing markets in other countries have popped up, but at significantly reduced rates. The local impacts to our local markets, the lack of markets to sell the most common municipal recyclables being paper, plastics, cardboard, and newsprint. Those markets have dwindled, in some cases evaporated. Significant drop in negative values in materials that we were once getting paid for. We're now either breaking even or paying to get rid of it. And those materials were used to offset the cost of our recycling programs. So it's had a very negative impact on not only our company, but every company in the industry. You can see in this graph right here how much in metric tons the U.S. exports to China of plastics and paper have dropped from a high of 200,000 metric tons in beginning of 2017. In March of 18, it's dropped to almost nothing. And that's the same for both plastics and paper. So the impact on these material streams and values, in 2017, approximately 65% of those material streams offered a reasonable processing return. And in 2019, that's basically flipped on its head, and now it's a cost liability. Many communities struggle with these material streams because they're contaminated. And what we mean by contaminated, again, is there's a lot of other things in those recycling streams other than the recyclables. Also, earlier this year, China announced its intent to ban all waste imports by 2020. 16 material types were banned in 2018, and another 16 material types will be banned by the end of this year. So some of the short-term responses and strategies, many of the MRFs, they're called MRFs, material recovery facilities across the country, have slowed down their lines in order to try and
clean up the waste stream as much as possible. When you slow down the line, you reduce productivity. When you reduce productivity, you increase your costs. So it's a double whammy. We're getting paid less for the material, and our costs are going up to process that material. Some new markets have evolved. Again, it's a glut in the market right now. So even though those new markets have come up, they can't absorb the amount of material that China was absorbing. So consequently, if you go to most material recovery facilities today, you will see something similar to this, where there will be stacks and stacks and stacks of bales of material with no home to go to. In Oregon and Washington in particular, earlier this year, there have been a number of jurisdictions that have allowed their materials to be landfilled, which is the last thing we want to see happen. It's been 30 years since we started recycling programs, and it's been a long struggle to get to where we are today. And it's a shame that today, with the markets doing what they're doing, many cities are reverting back to landfilling that material. There are some potential technologies out there. Waste-to-energy facilities, they're not going to happen in Southern California. Matter of fact, there were 2 waste-to-energy facilities in LA, one in Commerce, one in Long Beach. The one in Commerce just recently shut down. The one in Long Beach is still operating. And we are looking at some new technology because we're not seeing this changing anytime soon. With the impact that China has had on the world markets, we just don't see the recycling markets coming back to where they were as little as 2 years ago. So that the technology we're looking at, it's called EMSW, Engineered Municipal Solid Waste, where we take the material and convert it to a commodity. And it's kind of in its infancy right now. We're having some struggles at the state level with regards to counting it as diversion, and that's the big issue, is we need to get our cities diversion. And in order to do that, we need to get some changes in the law. And so we're going to be working hard. We started this year. We're going to be working next year to do that. So, but there are some technologies out there that we're working on. So the next steps, we're reevaluating, as I said, our current systems, the rates, the revenues, the contamination fees, communicating the concerns to our stakeholders. Like I said, I've mentioned, had this presentation done to all of our cities and the county this year. We're obviously monitoring the global markets constantly and exploring new markets and technologies. And that concludes my presentation. So what you have before you this evening is a request to add a recycling fee to your to your fee structure of 67 cents a month, which is just a little bit over $8, and it's $8.04 a year. What that will do is offset the revenues that we have lost as a result of China's sword policy. Those revenues would be used to offset the cost of the recycling programs that were initially discussed and implemented when we took over the refuse department here in 2011.
Any questions from council? Yes? Oh,
Well, first of all, thank you very much for sharing this doom and gloom story.
Trust me, like I told every city council, it's the last thing I want to be doing, but, you know.
Exactly. Well, I mean, there's a number of complexities to it, and obviously we're all victims of circumstances considerably out of our control. So we've got to face the reality and make adjustments. So I appreciate the walkthrough with this, and I guess it's not really a question, but kind of an observation. What you're proposing in your request, 67 cents a month increase, to basically offset your losses for the change in the industry. And while that's not a very substantial amount, in some households, might it not result in them making a decision not to recycle at all and put all of their waste into one barrel and have CR&R pick up their recycling barrel? Would that be an option? I'm not advocating that be done, but would that be an option that your clients would have?
Under your current franchise agreement, you're required to provide all three services every week. Whether the client uses it or not is up to their discretion. We hope that that doesn't occur, because at the end of the day, we're hopeful that we can continue some sort of recycling program, but we can't force folks to recycle or not recycle. Completely up to them. We've not seen a drastic change in any of our other cities or in the county where we've had a similar fee implemented to this date. And those fees were implemented back in July.
Yeah, I know in our household, we're very diligent in our recycling. In fact, we had you deliver a small waste container, and we rarely ever come close to filling that. And we asked for a larger recycling container, and we were thrilled when it went from every other week pickup of recyclable to every week, because we had to stockpile stuff in between when it was biweekly. So, and I think a lot of households have a similar experience where we've adapted to the educational aspects and trained ourselves to be very diligent in sorting out all of our waste products. So it's very disheartening to hear the news, but I'm not going to sit here and shoot the messenger, because
Appreciate that.
it's not your doing.
Appreciate that.
So your proposal would be that this would be an across the board, and it doesn't matter what the end user ends up doing, what decision they make.
Correct.
This would fiscally address your immediate problem.
Right. And also, I just wanted to add, keep in mind that the fee will be reviewed every year. So let's say the recycling markets do come back, then we can pull that fee out, because that fee is separate on your rate sheet. It's not included into the fees. So we did that on purpose in every one of our cities, so that I don't know what the world markets are going to do. If I had a crystal ball, it'd be great, but I don't. So we made sure with your city attorney that we have language in there that basically says if recycling markets come back, then we can pull that fee back out.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could just respond to something that Councilmember Brown said. Although CR&R as the franchisee cannot force the customers to do that, we have to have a local ordinance which requires everybody to have the appropriate amount of bins and to deposit recyclable solid waste and organics into the appropriate bin. Without having that ordinance, we wouldn't be able to meet our diversion requirements. It would be a problem with Cal Recycle. So we're kind of partners in a true sense that we have to have a regulatory component, and they do the service component, and both of those are supposed to work together to make sure everybody does recycle, but it's getting more difficult.
Yeah, my only comments, you guys are leading the industry in your anaerobic digester to take materials and turn it into natural gas. You need to speed up the waste to energy thing like some of the European countries are doing.
That's
California too.
I can't speak too much about it yet, but that's what that EMSW component is looking at doing, is addressing this issue.
because, again, we don't think this issue is going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think it's going away anytime soon, and you would, you would think logically that the state of California, as green-minded as Sacramento is and everybody that's up there, that they would come up with solutions before they put all the regulations and unfunded mandates down on everybody else. But thank you for the presentation.
So, Linda, do you remember that in Romoland, that facility that did the waste to energy, it was one of the projects that Lori was on the ground floor of, and it's right on, I want to say, not Menifee Road, and
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's
Yeah.
close to the 74-215, just east
yeah,
of
but I mean,
the
it's like before the
lumberyard.
school, I think, but it's in Romoland. It was in
I
Romoland.
don't think they operate anymore, do
They don't operate anymore, but man, I went to that facility and saw that operation, and that was incredible what they were able to reduce that waste down to, and the energy that they produce in addition to that. So I will tell you that Lori's got all the information on that. on
Well,
that
I'll tell you
program.
what,
And
I
wasn't
hope to be-
Eagle, didn't they have a facility at Eagle out in the desert? Eagle Mountain? But they had this facility really, I don't know why it didn't continue, whether or not it just wasn't feasible at the time or cost effective, but I tell you, when I saw this item, I wasn't really that happy. And I asked the city manager to cost it out, what it would cost our residents. 67, I was surprised it was only 67 cents. And I think that CR&R is innovative enough and certainly has shown their expertise in a number of areas, such as the anaerobic digester, that we expect you to come up with something.
Well, I hope to, the next few months, be able to come back
Okay,
to
good.
with something.
That's
Thank you.
good. So with that, was there anyone that wanted to speak on this item?
Yes, Mayor, right, there's one request to speak from Debbie Vera.
Okay.
Dia?
Dia.
Hello, I'm Debbie Venna from Hemet. I've been an environmentalist for about 30 years, and by that I mean very active. I volunteered at an ecological reserve, I hiked trash out, and I taught public classes. And one of the things is currently, politically, the water bottles are an issue, and economically, you're having massive changes. San Francisco, all of the millennials are pushing aluminum and water in aluminum cans rather than water bottles. It's a recycling issue. It's one of the reasons I always carry my water with me. You almost never see me drink a bottle of water. I can't stand it because I understand the cycle of the water and what's happening. So speaking on that with the MRFs, one of the things that happened, and no disrespect to you, but in funneling and trying to funnel the recycling into a closed environment, a couple of things happened. State of California started to take the recycling money away. You know, you pay 5 cents on a bottle. That's supposed to be able to be collected back. And a lot of our homeless depended on that, and that's no longer available to them. Socially responsible people do recycle, but at the apartments where I live, it's just not feasible. 67 cents can mean the difference of somebody having toilet paper for the month. You know, if they run out, that's a roll. There are people that can't afford that. So it really adds up. And the biggest thing for me is just, it's the homeless. I talk to people all the time that are digging in the trash. I always offer them water, especially in the summer. You know, do you want a bottle of frozen water? I park my truck next to the big dumpster. I meet a lot of people that way. I met a woman that with one eye, and she's out in the, she has an income, but she doesn't feel comfortable socializing in the day, but she's out, you know, that's her thing. She's dumpster diving. It's a whole different class you guys aren't really aware of, but it comes into the recycling. In the environment and ecology, you have people, and you have the mushrooms, and they have their place in the cycle of life. That's what's happening economically and in our trash cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
No, there are no other speakers.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this item by council?
Mayor, can I just briefly give you a short synopsis of the insurance changes that were involved? I don't know that we covered those yet. I want to make sure that you hear them.
Thank you for that.
CR&R had initially made a request, two requests. One, they had looked at the overall aggregate insurance policy limit that we had for commercial general liability, which was $20 million. And their broker had reviewed the industry and indicated that that was at least double the average in the market. Also, under our existing agreement, CR&R is required to use what are called admitted insurers. That means the California Insurance Commissioner has done essentially a financial vetting of them and guarantees their financial solvency. Their broker indicated that that was also a heightened provision, and they wanted to use non-admitted but allowed insurers at a specific best companies rating. There's a rating system for all insurance companies. We, as staff in my office, we looked at those. I looked at a number of different waste agreements that we have with a number of our clients. The $20 million aggregate was excessive. I will tell you, it was that high because you'll remember that for decades we had our own waste hauling, and we put a lot of provisions in the original agreement with the idea that we didn't know what was going to happen in the first couple of years. So we were very aggressive in some of these things. As a compromise, what we agreed we would propose to the council is lowering the $20 million aggregate CGI to 10, but increasing the individual or per occurrence from 3 to 5. Also, we had pollution insurance. Pollution insurance was only $5 million. Instead, we've increased the aggregate to 10. So we dropped the CGI limit, but increased the pollution insurance. That's where there's potentially much more liability, and also increased it per occurrence to $5 million. So kind of try to meet in the middle. With regard to the use of admitted, we still say that they can use admitted, but instead of just using authorized, there's a middle ground that's called a listed insurer. A listed insurer is financially vetted by the California Insurance Commissioner, just not with the same rigor as somebody who's an admitted surety. So we've proposed using listed insurers. Because of those changes, my office went through the entire insurance provision and we revamped it. We provided some additional protections for the city. We changed and updated the policy limit numbers, and I think have a better overall provision than we had before. I can try to answer any questions about that or any of the other changes if you have questions. Thank you.
Any questions from council? So, let me digest that for a minute. So it essentially affects what we have in our agreement, right?
Yes.
Amending our agreement, right? And that is something that we would have to have in place, or should have in place, before we approve this recommendation?
The proposed amendment that we have will take care of not only the recyclable fee, but all of the insurance provisions. And they have insurance in place right now. If this is approved, they will have to modify their insurance policies and insurers, but they'll work with staff in order to do that. We've got to go through kind of a interactive process looking at which insurers they want to have.
How do we know that that would be something that they'd agree to?
Well, they can keep the existing insurers that we have, but they'll have to increase their policy limits on the per occurrence under minimum circumstances. So that won't result in any rate increase. There's no rate increase to the customers that are associated with the insurance.
That was my concern more than anything.
Yes, no, nothing there.
Okay. So with that, are we ready to make a motion, or if there's any more discussion? Oh, I wanted to add one more thing, and that is the assurance that that cost will be reduced if, in fact, China sword issue changes.
Correct. That's the plan. Hopefully the markets do come back, but I can't guarantee it. I have no idea.
Okay.
So, Mayor, the provision that we've added will require the parties to review that rate annually, and that rate has to be justified by CR&R by providing us some information about the actual sales prices, average sales prices of their materials, and not only that, but the cost of their services. We didn't want any excess profit taking in this agreement, so we'll have to look at both of those. What's the cost of the program? What are they selling the material for? Are they still meeting their reasonable rate of return, or are they getting a huge return? In which event we would say, no, that fee has to come down. The original point behind the franchise agreement was that we're getting the recycling services for free, because it was premised upon the existing market at the time and that had existed, that they could sell those materials and completely offset their costs. So that's a fundamental change to the bargaining position, negotiating position that people or the parties agreed to. So that's why we've agreed to submit it to you. Not only that, but we don't want them to be putting it in the landfill.
Right.
We've had a couple instances where that is what was happening. They weren't storing not CR&R, that other waste haulers were not storing it. They didn't have capacity to store it. They couldn't sell it, so they were putting it in the landfill. And if they put it in the landfill, we don't get diversion credits. If we don't get the diversion credits that we need now, we start to get fined by CalRecycle.
I do have one.
Okay.
So I'm looking at your Exhibit 2 in the staff report, and I see where it's clearly the extraordinary effective date of October 1st of the 67 cents, and that in parentheses says that's an additional to residential and mobile home park rates. Are there any changes in commercial rates at all that are impacted by that?
No, there are not.
So the only place that's impacted is mobile home parks and residential.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other comments or questions, I can have a motion and a motion on 8A.
Second.
Let's vote. And that is approved 4-0.
Thank you, Council.
Next item, 8B, Caltrans meeting discussion and recommendations from the ad hoc committee.
Thank you, Mayor. So over the last few months, Caltrans staff has been meeting with city staff as well as the ad hoc committee. There are a series of questions that have arisen over the course of those conversations that we wanted to have input from the entire council on. As it relates to what those items are in particular, what the staff is seeking direction on is a series of 4 questions. In our meetings with Caltrans, they disclosed to us that in the Florida Median Avenue segment, or the Florida Avenue segment between Santa Fe and Gilbert, the median has been removed from that portion of the project. With that being said, discussion from the ad hoc committee has been the desire to have the median placed back into that segment of Florida. So the number 1 question is, does the city wish to request to have the median installed in the area between Santa Fe and Gilbert in the downtown, which would be a new amendment to that existing project? Caltrans has mentioned to us that we may be liable for the cost of that addition, since it isn't included in their plans. Item number 2 is, what is the preferred color of the median? In the backup, you have a few different options of the color choices that Caltrans has available. They have said that they are available to, or they are open to getting a recommendation from the city. Item number 3 is, does the city wish to request the construction for landscaping on the median? If the council does desire that, the city will also need to identify a funding source. I should note that Caltrans spent about $250,000 in designing landscape plans for the median. Due to a number of indecisions, that landscaping was not included in the construction documents based on past indecisions. Again, Caltrans will not provide any maintenance of the landscaping, and also noted that any construction costs would have to be borne by the city of Hemet. And then finally, does the council wish to formally request night work in the following areas to limit impacts during the day to the following locations and segments? On Florida between Sanderson and Lyon, and then finally from Santa Fe to Columbia. Caltrans has not agreed to any of the items above, nor have they made any commitments that they would do any of the items above, but they are open to exploring the items and determining any of the potential viability of those items. Again, Caltrans may require the city to provide all construction costs for the median between Santa Fe and Gilbert in the downtown. Once the council weighs in on those items and those questions, staff will formally request those items in a letter and send to the appropriate Caltrans staff. There are a few alternative options that the council does have. If the council chooses not to make a recommendation on item 1, which is having the median installed back in the segment that I mentioned, the project will continue without a median in that area. If council chooses not to make a recommendation on item 2, the color and design will be made solely by Caltrans with no input from the city. If council chooses not to request item 3, the project will continue as planned, and Caltrans will not explore the potential to include landscaping. Again, the city will also not be required to identify any funding sources for the construction of landscaping, pay for the construction of the landscaping, or allocate staff resources and funding for the future maintenance of the landscaping. So with that being said, I wanted to make sure that the council provided some direction to the staff so that we would have the collective direction from the entire council so that we could formulate a formal response or formal request to Caltrans. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so don't we have a presentation on the things to choose from and such available?
We don't have a presentation. It is in the agenda packet, though.
Agenda packet, but the attendees can't see the agenda packet, so I was hoping that we could have it up on the screen. So I haven't even had a chance to talk with the rest of the ad hoc committee or to you about a funding source for the landscape project. So I will tell you that SCAG has been requested to possibly provide funding for that, as well as a legislator out of his discretionary funding to help us with this project. So when we met, I think we discussed it last council member when we went and spoke to Caltrans, and that was the first time we saw that the median was taken out of downtown, and which was a surprise because that's the very area that was always in the downtown specific plan, and the only area that was to be landscape, or to have the median and landscape. More for the aesthetics than anything, making the downtown look a little bit nicer. In the meantime, I've received some discussion, or received some comments about the median downtown, whether it's a good idea or not idea. And before I go on any further, I want to see if there's anybody from the public that wishes to speak on this item.
Mayor, right there. Oh, I don't have a speaker.
I see
Yeah,
Mr.
I
Searle,
didn't fill out a card, I'm sorry.
State your name, please.
Sorry about that.
You know the process.
I know the process. Thank you, Mayor Wright.
Past mayor.
And council members. I'm here because I'm a downtown business owner. And when this thing started out, we were told that from Gilbert Street to Santa Fe that it was going to be open, that there wasn't going to be a median downtown. As I understand it, that median is supposed to be landscaped, which is going to cost money. Pretty obvious that Caltrans isn't going to landscape it and take care of it. You got to get water over to it and keep it irrigated. I've seen some of the trees and so forth look like downtown, and it makes me a little nervous. I mean, we've got a big investment downtown. We got a business. The other thing is that I understand that Caltrans offered $1 million to the city that they declined for maintenance on the median. Is that true?
No, not that I
Huh?
know of. Not true at all.
Never?
Never. That we're aware of in this.
Wrong again. Okay.
Yeah. We'd have jumped on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet you would right now. Anyway, I think it's going to affect business downtown. I do. Maintenance downtown, if you know, there's a little park just across the street from you guys that's in pretty poor shape. Bricks are broken. Pipes are sticking out of the ground. Pipes drainage pipes are broken too. So I question whether the city has the ability or the manpower to maintain and do what's needed if they're going to landscape a median downtown. I mean, I'm for a median downtown if it's nicely kept and landscaped. But if it's looks like the rest of downtown right now with the trees that are dying on the side and there's no water in the middle, it doesn't make any sense to me. So,
Thank you for your comments.
okay, thank you.
Any other speakers?
No, Mayor, right there's no other speakers.
Okay. Council comments, questions? Linda?
On the median, in the downtown specific plan, it does, which was approved in April of 2017 by a bunch of the community in general, it does reference that the downtown area from, just have it, well anyway, downtown, proposed median with traffic calming and increased pedestrian thing. Walkability. However, it also references, and Caltrans' future planning staff was involved in doing this plan for the downtown and for the improvements to Florida Avenue along with this. They have another grant other than the one that they have right now, which is a safety grant. The next grant they have for $19 million is to make Florida multimodal, which is now required by the state law, that all state highways that have to allow for pedestrian and bicycle right-of-ways. So that's coming. It's not necessarily in